What's up, everybody? And today we're checking out who's winning the Iran war. This is by Warfront. I'm pretty sure we've watched one of their videos in the past. The guy who's doing the talk over, I forgot what his name is, but we've seen him a billion times when he's doing dialogue over these videos. Anyway, I got sent this video by a couple people online saying it's a really good summary with kind of the current affairs of what's going on in Iran right now. So we're going to watch it. We're going to have some fun. I will leave a link to Warfront down below. What's really cool is, and you know how important this is to me, okay? When people make these informational videos, okay, like Warfronts, and there's a couple of other channels that do this, the reason I like going to these channels, look at this, references. They go through and they cite all their sources. Now, I want you to be very, very careful when you're getting information online, guys, of making sure you can find out where this information is coming from. In a world where misinformation is so prevalent, we've just had a couple of days of people thinking that the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has died, right? Only to find out that he's not. There's so many rumors going around. You need to be able to cite your sources. So firstly, make sure you do that. Secondly, Warfronts, well done for doing this, because I think this is some of the best stuff you can do on YouTube right now is citing your sources. So well done, Warfronts. And in my opinion, they deserve a subscribe. So if you haven't gone over there, let's get them subscribers over there. Okay, guys? Before we get started, though, check out Chug. 10% off, link down below for the best drinking vessel in the world. Look at these things. Absolutely legendary. If you want to look like an absolute legend this summer while you're around the fire with the boys, drinking a drink, drinking your mead. I love mead, by the way. I love mead. It's really tasty. Drinking mead out of one of these. Oh, like a legend. Free customization, free bag, 10% off, link down below. Handmade, sustainable materials, made in Britain here in the UK, and they ship to America. Go get yourself one. Also, if you didn't see, I made a drink. I worked really hard on this. Really did. 2 years of development. And we're actually, this is my first time announcing it, actually. We've got 2 events in the UK booked where we're going to have an event stand, and I'm going to be there selling morale. Once the confirmation is 100%, which one is, the other one isn't 100% yet, but we're going to confirm it today. I will let you know what them events are, and you can come see me, and we can have a good old chat and drink some morale together. Wouldn't that be cool? One of them is, the one that is confirmed is called, one second, I want to get the correct name. The British Wild Food Festival. Right here. I'm going to be at the British Wild Food Festival. And it's going to be glorious. I'm going to be selling morale, chatting to people. It'd be really cool to meet some of you guys. Anyway, let's shut up. Let's pull this up. And let's see what they've got to say about the war in Iran.
Have laid waste to the nation of Iran. Ayatollah Khomeini is no more. The Iranian military is in complete disarray, and no matter what happens next, the future of the Middle East has already been changed.
It has.
On a tactical level, Washington and Jerusalem have achieved incredible levels of success, securing air supremacy over a high share of Iran's territory and hitting the targets they want, whenever they want, with whatever ordnance they want. After decades spent fighting a regional Cold War, Israel is reducing its archenemy to rubble, and the United States is so confident in its strength that Donald Trump has already declared victory.
Let me tell you, we've won.
But battlefield successes, by themselves, they're not enough to win the war. And right now, there is a massive gap between the US and Israel's tactical dominance and the strategic victory that the two allies are chasing. After 2 weeks of constant bombardment, the Islamic Republic still stands, and regime change is now a distant prospect.
A few days ago, probably more like a week ago now, maybe just over a week ago, we're at like, what, day 17 of the war now, or something like that? 15 maybe? I was saying that regime change it's a guarantee. Feel like there's been a bit of a lull, hasn't there? There's been a bit of quietness over the past like 3 days, where it just feels like there's a bit of a, I don't know, like a bit of a down period where we're a bit unsure actually about how well this is going. mostly because of the Strait of Hormuz and the way that Iran are going about this, is actually a lot more complicated than we first presumed. At first, it was a case of, well, America's just going to dominate everything. And they still are. America are completely dominating everything. But there's a few little caveats here and there that need to be sorted that are actually quite big question marks. Like the Strait, like these underwater drones that are going on, and a bunch of other threats that Iran are making. Whether this new supreme leader, the son of the one that's died, is even still around. This is why misinformation is so prevalent.
Strait of Hormuz is shut down, and the wider Middle East, especially the oil-rich Gulf states, are still facing the constant threat of attack. Iran's new supreme leader isn't looking to compromise. In fact, he's more hardline than his father ever was, and the rhetoric out of Iran over the past few days would indicate that Tehran has zero intention of backing down. With even a quick glance at the headlines, you'd know that the US, Israel, and their allies are winning the vast majority of battles each day.
Yeah.
But as for who's winning the war, that's a tougher question to answer.
Yeah.
The case for the coalition. Now, when nations go to war, what defines victory? War isn't a competition. It's not some sort of contest of destruction where one side kills more enemies or destroys more targets, and so that side goes home with a trophy and the bragging rights. War is a means to an end. Nations go to war because they want something badly enough to fight for it, and because their enemy wants the opposite outcome badly enough to fight back. A fighting force can dominate the battlefield, it can outclass its opponent completely, but if its troops come home and its war effort ends before the fighting force gets what it came for, then they haven't won. The inverse is true as well. A fighting force can get torn to shreds, suffer incredible damage over the course of a conflict, and lose so much more than its adversary did. But if that fighting force achieves whatever it set out to achieve, they could still regard that outcome as a victory. Now we are presenting...
This is why there's a lot of grey area with this war right now, because there's been no regime change yet. There's been absolutely none. And that can be quite frustrating.
This episode to argue one side or the other, or to tell fans of Trump, Netanyahu, or the Iranian regime respectively that their preferred fighting faction is barreling towards some inevitable defeat. We're all
just looking at my phone now, because I get updates on my phone about news when it comes to this war all the time. Mostly because I want to stay up to date with what's going on. Basically, it literally just popped up when I was talking then, and I think it threw me off course a little bit. The British Prime Minister Starmer, is going to speak to Trump after calls of NATO allies to help secure the Strait of Hormuz, which I feel like is a bit of an inevitability. But the reason it's kind of giving me more of a question mark. It says here, UK PM Keir Starmer is due to speak about financial help for people using heating oil. Where is it? This comes after Donald Trump said it would be very bad for the future of NATO. This is why videos like this are so important about, yes, the US is winning every single battle, but is it winning the war? Because we get two different rhetorics from Trump. We get the US doesn't need NATO. We don't need to be part of NATO. But then we get things like this: help us with the Strait of Hormuz or we won't be in NATO. So do they need the help or do they not need the help? Does the US want to be part of NATO or do they not need NATO? And I'm not saying this as like a way to dig at anyone. This is why it's so difficult trying to find legitimate real news. Because on one side, in fact, this is why it's even more difficult with someone like Trump in charge. Because he changes his opinions every 5 minutes, doesn't he? He'll say one thing and then the next day he'll be like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm doing this instead. And so I'm throwing this out there actually to you guys. Considering how dominant the US is being in the war of Iran, why do you think the US wants help from NATO to help secure the Strait of Hormuz? Let me know in the comments.
in the question who's winning the Iran war, because right now the situation is inconclusive. The war's still ongoing, each side has a chance at achieving its core objectives, and the best we can do for now is to lay out the argument for each side to claim that it's gaining the upper hand, as well as the reasons that we should hesitate to accept those arguments at face value.
Yeah.
We'll start with the US-Israeli coalition, where the easiest argument that Washington and Jerusalem are winning is an argument we've already laid out. The Americans and Israelis have achieved incredible tactical successes during their air campaign. By their accounts, they've killed dozens of Iranian leaders, plus thousands of Iranian troops and paramilitary personnel.
Yeah.
They've sent a large share of Iran's navy to the bottom of the sea, and they've blown most Iranian air power out of the sky. A large portion of Iran's military infrastructure has been destroyed or heavily damaged. US and Israeli air defenses have achieved high success rates in defending the surrounding airspace, and control of the skies is now so complete that unstealthy US heavy bombers can fly over Iran with impunity.
Wow.
The United States has absorbed less than 10 fatalities on its own side as of the time of writing, as well as 2 soldiers and 16 civilians acknowledged killed on the Israeli side. And while both nations have suffered damage to their military assets, they've dealt much more damage to Iran than both America and Israel combined have had to absorb.
Yeah.
Iran cannot meaningfully challenge coalition air power, and it's been unable to draw the coalition into costly battles on the ground. Maybe the US and Israel haven't achieved all their objectives quite yet, but whatever you call this situation, they sure as hell aren't losing. Take a look at the basic objectives that Israel and the US seem to be pursuing: the destruction of the Iranian regime, the elimination of any Iranian threat to Israel or the wider Middle East, the end of Iran's nuclear program, and more. Yeah, we should acknowledge that there's some uncertainty about the coalition's wartime objectives, especially when it comes to the United States, but the broad strokes are obvious. No more Iranian ayatollahs threatening Israel, the US, or any of their allies in the future. For all the damage they've done, the US and Israel aren't all that much closer to achieving those outcomes today than they were 2 weeks ago.
It's
And
true.
Perhaps even worse, it's not clear how they're going to get there.
This is another reason why I'm starting to wonder whether we'll start seeing boots on the ground. Is it going to become to the point where it's like we literally, no matter how much we're beating them, we can't do anything about it? We're going to have to put boots on the ground. It's getting weird. It's getting so weird.
Issue of regime change. Depending on who you ask on a given day, coalition leaders may or may not describe a regime change as a core objective, but at the very least, they'd like to make sure that Iran is ruled by people who aren't going to pose a threat in the future. Yet even though Iran's former supreme leader, his inner circle, and a high share of his allies up and down the regime have been killed, Iran's new leaders aren't moderating. In fact, Iran's new supreme leader, Mujtaba Khamenei, is more of a hardliner than his father ever was, and according to both Iranian and Israeli sources, he was elevated directly by Iran's very powerful Revolutionary Guard Corps. He is the chosen leader for an Iranian faction that's among the most ideologically opposed to the US and Israel in the entire country.
That's the thing. Their motives are so much stronger than the average US soldier. Maybe not Israeli soldiers. We know their opinion on religion and stuff like that. But the average US soldier has less of a desire for this war than the average Iranian soldier. I think we could all agree on that, right?
The coalition does have tools to bring about regime change by other means, but those tools seem to be losing their potency. The United States could kill Mujtaba Khamenei and his replacement after that, and so on and so forth, until they work their way down to a leader who's more willing to cooperate, like Delcy Rodriguez has been in Venezuela. But by Donald Trump's own admission, most of the people the US might have chosen for that role were killed.
Guy looks shiny there, doesn't he? What's going on there? Christ almighty, the lighting.
Were killed in the first few rounds of airstrikes. At the start of the war, there was a lot of speculation that Iranian citizens could rise up, and Israel in particular has gone about bombing police and internal security installations, distributing weapons and small drones, and otherwise laying the foundation for an uprising. But that hasn't happened yet, partially because the destruction hasn't been extensive enough that Iranians would risk standing up to their leaders, and partially because Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu called for a popular uprising long before the conditions were set to support anything like that. When reports do trickle out from within Iran, it's clear that ordinary people are losing faith in the US and Israel's leadership and their ability to pursue critical objectives. And while the coalition might still support a Kurdish-led ground invasion, the element of surprise for that offensive has now been lost. According to Reuters, US intelligence concluded just days ago that after what was almost 2 weeks of bombing at that time, the Iranian regime is not at risk of collapse.
That's crazy, isn't it? the resilience of these people is quite profound, isn't it? You've got to give it to them. Listen, any good soldier has to be very, very realistic about the people they're fighting against. You can't deny that these Iranian regime is resilient. They're getting hammered, and yet they are still working. It's pretty insane, isn't it?
At the same time, coalition forces have been unable to stop some of the Iranian attacks that matter most. Missile, and especially drone strikes against key economic and infrastructural assets in the wider Middle East. Iran has caused...
There was a rumor that they're going to start going against data centers in the Middle East as well, which would really throw a spanner in the works for a lot of companies in the West.
Severe damage and shutdowns at refineries and natural gas facilities across the region in places like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Oman. It successfully shut down the Strait of Hormuz, with ships now mostly refusing to pass through the waterway, and as a result, it's caused global energy prices to rise dramatically.
Yeah.
It took Iran less than 2 weeks to force the world to release 400 million barrels of reserve oil, the largest market intervention in history, to stave off a complete economic panic. The coalition hasn't been able to wipe out the well-hidden stockpiles of long-range drones that have made Iran's destruction possible.
And I said this in the previous video, I'm going to say it again. Iran's been planning for this war for over a decade. They've been planning for this war for over a decade. Unlike the US, Israel probably also has been planning. Well, we know that they've wanted the US to fight Iran for over a decade. And we know that Iran's been preparing for the US to fight them. Israel was just waiting for a US leader that would agree to do it with them. And they've now got one with Trump. And yes, the US has all this might, but Iran has been planning meticulously. Don't get me wrong, all these plans that Iran's had so far, not all of them, but a good chunk of them have not worked out, right? We've seen the Navy completely decimated, the air power's completely gone, all this stuff. But that doesn't mean that they still haven't got a few tricks up the sleeve, and we need to be very much aware of that.
That means Iran can continue threatening the region, paralyzing global trade and throttling energy markets, regardless of the fact that Iran has taken the worst of the damage. The US and Israel can still escalate in other ways. They could begin ground operations, either with limited objectives like assassinations or the capture of Iran's economically critical Karg Island, or by building up a troop presence on the border to create the threat of a larger invasion. They could target some of the infrastructure that allows the regime to function, as the coalition did on the 11th of March when it targeted a data center that supports the bank Iranian forces rely on to get their paychecks. But there isn't any guarantee that a regime collapse will come next, and certainly not that it would come quickly. To the extent that Trump's administration had domestic or international support for this operation, that support is already degrading. The newest set of public opinion polls on the conflict, as of the time of writing, showed that a majority of Americans outright disapprove of the war.
Of course they do. Of course they do. We've seen it time and time again with Iraq and Afghanistan, where soldiers are getting sent to fight a war that really and truthfully isn't impeding in their lives back in America in any way, really. Yeah, you could talk about 9/11, etc., but, you know, the links between that and the war in Iraq and Afghan, they've started to dissipate, haven't they? And so what everyone's looking at is they're thinking that the war in Iran is Israel's war that America's been pulled into. Now, whether you agree with that or not doesn't really matter, because that's what the majority of people are saying. They're saying this is Israel's war, and the US has been roped into it to fight for them. I'm not going to give my own opinion on that, but I'd love to know what you think in the comments.
Internationally, as French President Emmanuel Macron told a video call of G7 members this week, quote, "No one can tell what US President Donald J. Trump wants from this ongoing war with Iran," end quote. According to Israeli sources, even Jerusalem is preparing for the possibility that the US could withdraw from the war suddenly without achieving any further objectives, and in that case, Israel would probably have to wind down its operations too.
The thing is, what's happened now is the US has created a country where there are going to be children born with an even bigger animosity towards the West. What it's done is it's causing generational trauma to a lot of people that inevitably are going to end up trying to fight back and become extremists. That's what's happened. they're creating an environment for retaliation and hatred towards the West. That's what they've done. They've created this environment now. So there's two things that need to happen. One, this needs to end. I don't know how it's going to end, but it needs to end. And then secondly, there needs to be some sort of relationship build between the citizens of Iran and countries like America. I have no idea how that's going to happen. There's a lot of people that agree with a regime change in Iran. A lot of people. And I think that would be one of the best paths to prevent any of this uprise and extremism. However, there's also a lot of people that don't. And that's the reality of it, unfortunately. It's kind of worrying. It is kind of worrying. Because it's just making more animosity, isn't it? I'd love to know your thoughts on that in the comments.
So this is where we ask the question. If the US withdraws sometime soon, and the overall situation looks like it does now, is that a victory?
No.
And before we discuss the Iranian side of this dilemma, we've got to take a moment and highlight the place to go for even more information on the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, as well on the website.
We'll pass through the sponsor real quick.
The case for Iran. When we turn to look at Iran's side of the equation, the things that are going poorly for Iran will be the things that are going well for the coalition and vice versa. Regardless of anything else, Iran is most certainly getting its ass kicked right now. Its pre-war leadership has been demolished, its military has been degraded, and its long, slow economic catastrophe has gotten even worse. But unlike the United States and Israel, Iran is pursuing the core wartime objective of survival. As of now, the Islamic Republic is surviving, and although it's clearly miscalculated in its attacks on the Gulf states and other regional governments, its basic theory of war with the West has been working. Iranian missiles, drones, and sea mines really did force a shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz, and they really did allow Iran to hold the global economy hostage. If Iran were fighting this war and trying to meet America or Israel's standard of victory, then it would have done a horrifically bad job. But Iran isn't doing that. They're pursuing a different set of objectives, and so it's held to a different set of standards.
Yeah.
Iran's goal is survival, not of individuals or even of key leaders, but of the Islamic Republic itself, and right now, the Islamic Republic still stands. But for Iran, there's one critical problem. The war isn't over yet. Because Iran's goal is to preserve something rather than to defeat something, Iran can only achieve its goal once the conflict has ended. But although the coalition's destruction of so much Iranian capability doesn't mean Iran is fully defeated, it does mean that Iran is losing its ability to dictate when the conflict ends. If Iran can't make that decision, and it's already fighting a war, then it only has one choice. Hold on tight and hope that the coalition either decides that the cost of its war is too great or otherwise loses interest in fighting.
Which also, that reminds me, someone commented in the previous video about how much it's cost so far. And we're talking tens of billions so far this war for the West, right? For America, for Israel. Mostly America, because America actually funds a lot of Israel. So this is a lot of money. A lot of money. I mean, if there's anything we know about America's leadership right now with Trump, is money is the most important thing. So to him. And so when he starts seeing the numbers rising and rising and rising and not much coming out of it, I think that's where Israel's panicking. That Trump will be like, you know what, this is a bad business venture. And then he pulls out, and then Israel's on their own with a very limited stockpile of ammunitions. This is bizarre. As you know, on this channel, I try my hardest to be as unbiased as I possibly can. That's always been my goal with this channel. And I'm going to try and remain that way. But the longer this goes on, the less successful it sounds for America. That's the truth of it. Don't get me wrong, America is this absolute powerhouse that just dominates with power. But the goal isn't being reached. We know that.
Iran can impose costs of war upon the coalition. That's exactly what it's been trying to accomplish by shutting down the Strait of Hormuz and attacking across the Middle East. But because of the arse-kicking that Iran has already received, its ability to impose those costs is growing weaker by the day. Nobody outside of Iran knows, for sure, what Iran has left in its arsenal, and at this stage of the war, Iran's leaders probably don't know either. But we do know that Iran has a finite number of missiles, a finite number of drones, and a finite number of launchers, not to mention the people trained to use them. Every time Iran launches its weapons, it reveals launch sites and infrastructure that could be tracked, targeted, and destroyed.
Yeah.
The more Iran uses, the more it jeopardizes the warfighting ability it has left. As we've seen, Iran can destroy Middle East targets if it needs to, but Iran's strategy works best when its military capabilities are used as a threat, not as a tool of destruction. If the war were to end tomorrow and Iran still had missiles, drones, and sea mines left over, then it could start making credible threats against the region immediately. The pull, however, is that Iran's adversaries know that, and Iran's targets know it too. According to reports from the Gulf states, although national governments feel burned by the US and Israel's decision to jeopardize regional security, their wishes are clear. If you're going to start this war, then make sure you finish the job. For Washington, Jerusalem, and really the entire Western world, it's basically the same calculus. Maybe this war was avoidable, and maybe the jury's still out on whether or not it was a good idea, but the worst thing the coalition could do now would be to back down. If that happens, then the Iranian regime survives, a more hardline government becomes entrenched, and the country's entire strategy of regional disruption is rewarded, meaning that this new, even more extremist leadership will double down for the next round.
And like I said, the extremism will only continue and get worse, unfortunately. So America and Israel are between a rock and a hard place right now, aren't they, with this? They can just keep hammering, spending billions, or they can put boots on the ground. I don't know. I honestly, as a former Royal Marines commando, I honestly don't know strategically what would be the best option for America right now. I don't want to see boots on the ground. Don't want that. I don't want US lads, my friends, putting boots on the ground for a war that, in truth, I don't necessarily believe in that much. Not as much as other wars. I just can't justify it to I get it, like I get the idea of Iran having nuclear power. We don't want that. We don't want more nukes in the world. We can all agree with that. 100%. But Iran has said they've never wanted to build nukes, even though they do. And Israel say the same thing, and we kind of know that they do have nukes now, even though they refuse to admit it. So are we being contradicting here? Are we being contradicting? I don't know. I honestly don't know what to think of this anymore. I really don't. Don't want to see my friends' boots on the ground in Iran. Ugh. Let me know what you think about that.
Hell, just imagine the implications for Iran's desire to build a nuclear weapon if conventional weapons can cause this kind of chaos.
Yeah.
So while there's a decent argument that Iran could declare victory today if America and Israel chose to end the war, Iran might also have shot itself in the foot and created a set of conditions where the coalition can't end its operations while the Iranian regime survives.
Yeah.
Go back to this episode to start a question. Who's winning the Iran war? And there's not a very strong argument for either side.
No.
But the precise circumstances of the ongoing deadlock raise a far more dangerous question. Is Iran headed for a forever war, even if nobody, including the US and Israel, would actually want that to happen? At this point, the coalition is in too deep. They can't end this conflict while the Islamic Republic remains in place, or they'll validate Iran's entire approach to geopolitics while leaving the nation in the hands of an even more dangerous set of leaders. But Israel and the US inadvertently installed. But the Islamic Republic can't back down either. After all, their core objective is survival, which means that capitulating under any circumstances is the one thing they simply cannot do. Both the coalition and Iran have lost access to many of the tools they once thought they could use to defeat each other.
What do you think? I'm torn on this. I really am. It's quite frustrating.
Iran is running out of missiles, drones, and launchers, and it's already spoiled the tolerance of the Arab world. But the US and Israel seem to have lost their chance to prompt a revolution, to launch a surprise Kurdish offensive, or to elevate a hand-picked, cooperative Iranian leader. As Trump himself explained on Monday, quote, "We've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough." That's not a situation that lends itself to an easy solution, or one that allows either the coalition or Iran to simply withdraw and claim victory regardless of the realities on the ground. It's a recipe for a much longer and much more intractable war than either side was betting on, a war that neither side is ready to win, and where in the end, everybody loses.
Absolutely fantastic video there by Warfronts. There is a link down below. Go over there and give it some love. They definitely deserve it. I honestly don't know what to think. I didn't even think we'd be in a position like this come, you know, a week ago, 2 weeks ago. But now we've got to a point where it is a little bit more up in the air about whether or not this is actually going to work. You know? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. I've got a lot of friends in the US military, and I would hate to see them put boots on the ground. I really would. I think it would just... the thought of their lives being put at risk is something that I don't want at all. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Check out Chug, 10% off link down below. And check out Morale if you haven't already. Get yourself outside, take some deep breaths. This type of stuff can be quite heavy sometimes and stressful. So go take some deep breaths, and I'll see you in the next video. I love you all. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.